think how ironic that Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar and the rest of the ladies on The View spend their time calling Republicans the conspiracy theorists. But they have been wrong about everything they have said over the last couple of years.
The courtroom was packed with bodies and buzzing tension. Every seat was taken, and even the walls felt like they were holding their breath. All eyes were locked on one woman, Whoopi Goldberg. But she wasn't the powerful figure from television anymore. She looked rattled, shaken, and on the verge of collapse. When the judge walked in and slammed his gavel down, the sound echoed like thunder. "Order in the court," he demanded, but the room could barely keep still. This wasn't just any hearing. This was the climax of one of the biggest media lawsuits in history. Whoopi sat stiff and pale at the defense table, her hands twitching as she gripped a pen she hadn't written with all morning. Her usual boldness was gone. Her lawyer whispered something, but she didn't respond. She was frozen. Across the room, Karoline Leavitt looked like a woman on a mission. Calm, focused, and iron-willed, she barely moved as the judge cleared his throat to read the next devastating blow. Her confidence filled the courtroom like a wave. Then it happened. The words everyone had been waiting for. The judge declared that Whoopi Goldberg was being officially sentenced in the defamation case. The gasps from the gallery were instant and explosive. Whoopi's mouth dropped open. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She looked at her lawyer, then the judge, then back down at the table, almost as if hoping this was a nightmare she could wake up from.
I would like this young lady this is her first job, I would like her to do a little homework. Because she said something yesterday that really pissed me off. And that was, she said, there will be no wokeness here.
Oh, yeah.
Let me explain something to you. Because without that wokeness, you might not have that job.
Yeah. I think she's probably been put in there because, according to Donald Trump, she's a 10. You know that's what it is.
I want to be clear, though. It's not her first job. It was her first press briefing. She worked in the previous Trump administration.
But it was real. The $800 million lawsuit that she once laughed off had now become a crushing reality. And in that moment, every joke, every smug smirk she had thrown on national TV came back like a slap to the face. Karoline didn't smile, didn't gloat. She just sat still, like justice was finally speaking for her. And the courtroom, so often filled with distraction and noise, was dead silent except for the sound of papers rustling and reporters typing furiously. Suddenly, Whoopi leaned forward as if the weight of the sentence hit her like a brick wall. She gripped the table tighter, her body hunched over. She blinked rapidly, trying to stay composed, but her strength was slipping away. Fast. One tear, then another. It wasn't a breakdown, it was a total collapse of the persona she had worn for years. Gone was the confident talk show titan. In her place sat a woman unraveling in front of the world. People watching from screens outside the courtroom began to react in real time. Tweets flew in, captions reading, "Breaking, Whoopi breaks down under pressure," started trending in minutes. This was no longer just a trial. It was a televised fall from grace. The judge didn't pause. He kept reading from the bench with stone-cold authority. Details of coordinated producer instructions, malicious framing, and deliberate attempts to provoke Karoline were spelled out one by one. Whoopi's name was mentioned again and again. Across the aisle, Karoline's legal team passed a flash drive to the court clerk. New evidence. Video footage, emails, internal production notes. The courtroom was stunned again. It was proof the attacks weren't spontaneous. They were scripted. The judge reviewed the evidence aloud, quoting an internal email. "Let Whoopi lead. Her words will trend."
ABC News President Kim Godwin saying in a statement, effective immediately, I am suspending Whoopi Goldberg for 2 weeks for her wrong and hurtful comments. While Whoopi has apologized, I've asked her to take time to reflect and learn about the impact of her comments.
You know, when you're a certain age, you use words that you know from when you were a kid or you remember saying, and that's what I did today, and I shouldn't have. I should have thought about it a little longer before I said it, but I didn't.
A gasp flew through the gallery. It was a takedown, not a discussion, and now the receipts were all in the open. Whoopi looked like she couldn't breathe. Her attorney leaned in, offering a cup of water and a whisper, but she couldn't even lift the cup. The moment was too big, too raw, too final. The courtroom watched in silence as Whoopi broke, fully and completely. Her reputation, her composure, her shield of fame, it all came crashing down in a quiet, heartbreaking collapse. And Karoline, she simply reached into her bag, pulled out a fresh copy of the lawsuit papers, and slid them across to her attorney with the calm of someone who knew the truth would speak for itself. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Media vans, protest signs, fans, critics, all of them waiting to hear what would come next. But inside, Whoopi sat frozen, trapped in a moment she couldn't escape. The judge leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. His voice rang out one last time for the record. This is not just about celebrity. This is about accountability. And just like that, the gavel struck again. Inside, Karoline stayed composed. Her eyes didn't wander. She didn't whisper to her lawyer or look for approval. She just sat tall, a quiet pillar of strength, as Whoopi's entire career crumbled across from her. Then came the next bombshell. An internal transcript was read aloud in court. It detailed how producers encouraged the hosts to corner the guest and drive conflict for social media impact. It was more than unethical, it was explosive. The judge read aloud, poke at her age, push her on race, let Whoopi close with a zinger. The courtroom gasped again. You could feel jaws dropping across the gallery. It was planned down to the second. Whoopi lowered her head into her hands. Her fingers shook. It was the face of defeat, of knowing that the camera tricks and applause signs wouldn't save her now. This wasn't a segment, it was a reckoning.
The most divisive and disgusting speech that any president, certainly in my lifetime, has ever given. He essentially waged war on half of the country by saying that we are all a threat to democracy because we believe in putting America first. It's not radical to want to put your country and your own people first. It's not radical to want to have a strong border, a strong military, and to unleash the might of your own economy, not economies around the world.
Even her own legal team looked rattled. One attorney flipped through notes, others whispered nervously behind stacks of documents. Their plan had collapsed the moment the evidence became undeniable. The judge then held up a screenshot from a Slack conversation. It showed a producer saying, "She'll crack. Trust Whoopi to trigger her." The courtroom murmured again, a buzz of disbelief filling the air. Whoopi's face was drained of color. Her lips moved like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Her voice, once so loud and sharp on TV, had vanished into silence. A recess was called, but Whoopi didn't stand. She stayed seated, staring blankly at the floor, like the weight of every headline she'd ever spoken was now crushing her from above. Outside in the courthouse plaza, protesters gathered with signs that read, "Justice for Karoline," and "The View is not the truth." News anchors were scrambling to adjust their scripts for the evening broadcast. Meanwhile, inside, a security guard approached Whoopi gently, asking if she needed to step outside. She whispered, "No, I didn't think it would come to this." Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. Karoline remained seated as well, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked across the courtroom, not with vengeance, but with vindication. This wasn't about destroying someone, it was about standing up for truth. During the recess, reporters huddled together, exchanging notes. Headlines were already being drafted. Whoopi Goldberg faces career-ending sentence. Karoline Leavitt brings down daytime giant. It was a media earthquake, and inside ABC's headquarters, panic was spreading like wildfire. Emails flew, emergency meetings were scheduled, and executives were demanding updates every hour. This wasn't just a scandal, it was an existential threat. Whoopi's lawyers tried to object, but it was too late.
I don't care if he's pooped his pants. I don't care if he can't put a sentence together. Show me he can't do the job, and then I'll say, okay, maybe it's time to go.
The documents, the emails, the transcripts, they had already spoken louder than anything they could say now. The facts were in full view. Then the judge looked directly at Whoopi, his voice firm. You are not above the law. Your platform does not give you a license to destroy someone's name. That line would be quoted everywhere within the hour. And as he spoke those final words, Whoopi's entire frame trembled. Her shoulders shook as she reached for a tissue, but even that small gesture looked broken. Her fall from grace wasn't just public, it was permanent. It was like the air had thickened with the weight of everything that had just unfolded. Whoopi sat back in her chair, but she didn't lift her head. The judge turned to Karoline's legal team and nodded. Proceed with final statements, he said, and the courtroom braced for the final blow. Karoline didn't rise. Her attorney did the talking, but her presence was thunderous. He spoke with calm fury, pointing to the pattern of public attacks. This was never about one bad comment, he said. This was about humiliation, defamation, and abuse of power, disguised as daytime entertainment. Whoopi's eyes welled up again. She looked down at the table like it might swallow her whole. The woman who once dominated morning television now couldn't even face the audience she used to command. The judge nodded gravely and began his sentencing summary. Every word hit like a hammer. He described the evidence as unsettling, the coordination as malicious, and the conduct as a betrayal of public trust. When he read the final part, sentenced to damages under the full weight of the $800 million lawsuit, the gallery gasped again. This was more than a win for Karoline. It was a moment that would redefine media responsibility. Whoopi's hands flew to her face. She began to sob, quietly at first, then uncontrollably. Her shoulders heaved as years of arrogance collapsed into a mess of tissues and shame. She was falling apart, and there was no one left to defend her. Her lawyer placed a hand on her back, but it was useless. Whoopi couldn't be consoled, not now, not after everything had been stripped away in full public view.
President Trump's life echoed the sentiment that President Trump is a threat to democracy. And if you're a deranged lunatic and you're mentally ill, you will believe that lie. And yes, you will take political violence like we have seen in 2 instances against President Trump. Last week, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris said that everyone who showed up to President Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden was a Nazi. That's despicable, dangerous, divisive rhetoric that is spewed by the Democrat Party every single day.
She wasn't Whoopi Goldberg, the icon, anymore. She was a defendant, and she had lost. Karoline sat motionless across from her, not smiling, not smug, just steady. This wasn't about revenge for her. It was about dignity, truth, and setting the record straight. And she had done it without a single meltdown. Outside, the courthouse steps were swarmed by reporters and supporters. People chanted Karoline's name while news stations cut into regular programming to announce the sentence. It was a national moment. Inside, Whoopi finally stood, wobbly, red-eyed, broken. She leaned on the table as she tried to gather her things. It was clear to everyone watching. She wouldn't be returning to The View, not after this. The judge made one final statement. This court recognizes that public platforms come with public responsibility. Use your voice wisely or face the consequences. Those words echoed as the courtroom emptied. As Karoline walked out, photographers yelled her name. But she didn't stop to pose. She didn't make a speech. She simply stepped into the sunlight, binder in hand, calm as ever, while the world erupted around her. That same hour, ABC's crisis team went into full lockdown. Executives were instructed to wipe internal Slack threads. A gag order was rumored to be issued for staff. Damage control wasn't just failing, it was unraveling. Producers from The View began deleting tweets. Interns whispered about job hunting. Longtime crew members started leaking information to reporters in exchange for anonymity. The show's entire foundation was cracking. And behind closed doors, ABC executives reviewed Whoopi's contract with urgency.
I respect everything everyone is saying to me, and I don't want to fake apologize. I'm very upset about that people are misunderstood what I was saying. I just leave. I go home. I go home to my life, and I take care of my cat and do all the stuff I'm supposed to.
Termination clauses, breach of ethics sections, and morality standards were suddenly front and center. Everyone wanted to know, how fast can we let her go? One internal source said, "We're not just losing a host, we're losing public trust." That single sentence captured the disaster perfectly. This wasn't a scandal, it was a collapse. On TikTok, X, and Instagram, clips of Karoline sitting silently in court with her binder had gone viral. Hashtags like #media accountability, #justice for Karoline, and #view collapse were trending worldwide. Commentators across the spectrum were stunned by her composure. "She showed us how to fight back," one political analyst said. "No screaming, no drama, just facts, court filings, and integrity." Even some former View fans admitted they felt betrayed. "I used to watch every day," one woman tweeted. "Now I see it was all fake. Whoopi wasn't interviewing guests. She was setting them up." And as Karoline's team exited the courthouse, one reporter asked, "Do you have any final words for Whoopi?" Karoline stopped just for a second, turned calmly, and said, "Let this be a reminder. Truth matters." That single quote exploded across headlines, screens, and timelines within minutes. It wasn't just a sentence, it was a movement in motion, a line in the sand drawn with quiet defiance. And now, with Whoopi Goldberg sentenced, ABC reeling, and millions watching closely, one thing is absolutely certain. Karoline Leavitt didn't just win in court, she changed the rules forever.